everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on open source mode. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Tom Rose, and Mr. Dan. Mr. Tom, what you want to discuss about open source mode?
Well, yeah, today we're going to step back a little bit from the campaign series because a lot of what we're talking about today is relevant to the Earthling initiative, which is one of the 3 initiatives in my meta initiative for the campaign. 10 years ago next month, I delivered a TEDx talk, and it was called Open Source Mode. And I made the argument in that talk that if we applied the tenets of open source code to people, to organizations, we could be more creative and be more inclusive. And I argued that our tendency toward exclusivity was one of our biggest existential threats now. I mean, it served us well, just like fear served us well. But exclusivity is now our new lion. It's our new threat. And so I used examples of companies who made their software open source. They released their source code to the public, and it made that software better, and it gained them market share. And so in that talk, I also just shared one of the modules of my open source mode method, which is a better brainstorming process. And I can share one segment of that later. But let me just let me share my screen, and I will play a short 1-minute video that kind of explains in general what open source mode is as far as a management consulting process. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, I've shared it, and let's try this.
Open source mode is a management consulting system designed to retrain people to be human prior to the installation of an AI coworker. Open source mode builds employee confidence by identifying, reasserting, and coalescing their unique human skill sets in a new kind of group. When included, understood, and bonded, humans become a meta-organism, an authentic, superintelligent biochemical algorithm with skill sets that fully complement any AI coworker. Open source mode, retraining people to be human.
Okay, that's basically it. At the end of that, I always want to say open source mode. It's what's for dinner. This keeps coming to mind. But anyway, that's kind of the general idea here. And it's a way of applying the tenets of open source code to people and to organizations. And because, again, exclusivity is our new threat. And so for this process, I use the concept I call strategic inclusivity. I use the principle of coalescence, and I use our superpower of empathy. And in general, strategic inclusivity means that everybody in the organization or the business has to be involved in this. Everyone from the CEO to the janitor, even. And I make the case that the less someone knows about a problem when you're using this method as a brainstorming session, the less someone knows about the problem in general, the broader the ideas will be. And I'll share a clip about that later. But so the idea is everyone has to be involved. And the whole point of this, and this really applies to the Earthling initiative, because with everyone that will be displaced by AI and automation, the onus is on us to create a whole new economy based on the things that we want to do, based on our passions. And so in a way, you can see AI automation as a good friend or an ally, because it is pushing us to do what we really want to do. And now with all the platforms out there, all the YouTube and Etsy's and all these platforms where we can make money off of our hobbies and our passions, it's challenging us to do that. And we don't really have a choice. We can either be displaced and the robots take over and then just fade away. But this is a real opportunity for us to hone in on those unique human skill sets, and there's still a few of them that can't be automated or coded, and learn how to really make money at that. And we talked about this before with the AI tutors, and if we were able to get AI tutors in the hands of young children, within a generation, they will already be moving toward this type of economy, something based that's hones in on their unique skill sets. And so the whole idea of this open source mode is to hone in on someone's niche expertise. Everyone has their own personal form of genius, and they rarely have anything to do with the titles that we have in our businesses. And so that's the idea. When I come into a company and when they're just about to install an AI coworker or an automated system, most people feel threatened by that, and they will work against it. So my niche for this consulting system is to come in and work with the employees right before that happens. And because and at the end of it, rather than feeling threatened, they look forward to being augmented by these systems. And so the method is really, you hone in on each individual's niche expertise. And it's like when you're at a company, you see the receptionist and everyone just assumes she's just the receptionist. But at night, she could be a classically trained cellist. There's a certain genius that she has that may not have anything to do with being a receptionist. And so we hone in on those things. And as soon as you do that with everybody in the room, you find out where, somebody could be an expert sailor on the weekends. Everyone has something that they do that has nothing to do with what they do for a job. And so we hone in on that, and suddenly everybody in the room is more qualified to be in that room. And so once we get them in that state of mind, in their own niche expertise, then you start working with them. And that's because it gives you sort of a responsibility when when she sees herself as a classically trained cellist and not just the receptionist. She feels more responsible about what she has to offer to the team. And so that's just part of the process. And so there's a question that I always ask at the beginning of all these sessions, and which really helps people figure out what that is if they don't know already. And I call it the bliss question. And it's simply this: what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized? And the reason you wish more people recognize is because it's been suppressed. Maybe when you were a kid, you were good at math and your parents kind of moved you toward becoming an accountant or something. And that wasn't really your passion. Maybe you like to draw, but they honed in on what was going to be good for society and what was going to be good for a job. And they kind of steered you into that direction. Society does it. Parents do it. Friends do it. We all feel like we have a certain skill set, but they rarely have anything to do with our bliss. And so that question, what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognize? Think about that question for a minute. Sometimes it'll come to you right away, but sometimes give it a couple of days and really hone in on what that is. And when you find out what that is, and it could be a couple of things, a few things, that's what you need to be focused on in this new economy. That's the skill set that you have come into this world with, that we can create a whole new economy based on. And now we have all these platforms to really focus on that. And so that's the idea. And so once we get people answering that question, if they don't already know it, again, everyone is more qualified to be in the room. And so that's the general idea of this. And it's not only just for a good management management consulting method, it scales to what we need to do as a society. Again, with a lot of displacement that's happening now and will continue to happen, especially even during the period of our campaign in the next 16, 18 months, whatever it is, we're going to see a lot of displacement. And that's why this campaign is all about sharing ideas like this now. Dan and I know where we might, when my campaign manager gets angry whenever I say this, but we don't think we're going to be walking in the White House in January 2025. But that's not what this is about. This is about sharing as many ideas as we can to help people right away. Because even if we did walk into the White House, the ideas we have would take months, if not a year, to get them signed into law, and then months, if not a year, to have a real impact on American families. And so we don't have that kind of time. We need to get ideas out there right now. And this is one of the ideas. And so it's really important to ask yourself the bliss question again: what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized. And the reason you wish more people recognize it is because it's been suppressed, either by your parents, by society, by your coworkers, by your friends. Hone in on that. And that's where you should be trying to make money. And so that's just the general overview of this method of what open source mode is and how it can be scaled to help all of us right now. You got anything to say about that, Dan?
Boy, this is like my favorite initiative, I think, because I've been a fan of open source ever since I figured out what it was. And if people don't know, the term comes from programming, where the code of a program is either what they call closed source, which means you'll get in trouble if you try to share it, or it's open source, which means, hey, I got this cool thing. You want to help fix it better? So I really think you can find a mirror for this. And, in a way, it's kind of competition versus cooperation. For the first billions of years of life on Earth, it was a biosphere composed of single-celled microbes that were in competition. It's like there's some food, either I get it or you don't. Kill or be killed kind of life. But something amazing happened at some point with the development of multicellular organisms, which we are. By coincidence, we are kind of open source multicellular organisms. In fact, most of you is not you. You are a loose, coherent colony of 100 trillion cells, and 900 trillion of those don't have human DNA in them. What's that, Tom?
You are. You're a loose collection of.
We all are, if we, last time I checked, but that's in normal space-time, which that might be showing some holes. the way UFOs act, they don't use normal space-time apparently. But causality, we might need open source causality next. So I think what you're doing, Tom, is mirroring evolution from competition to cooperation, from single cell to multi-celled cooperation. And the way, how did these cells learn to cooperate? They, like you said, Tom, they followed their bliss. They said, hey, I may look like, a E. coli, but I'm actually really good at, transporting calcium along my cell membrane. And it's like, maybe some other cell said, oh, you know what? I use calcium all the time. What if we made an agreement? Or, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but, something like this did happen, throughout. And, so we're basically, if we lost all our non-human cells, we'd be dead in a couple hours, basically, if we stop cooperating. And, there's nothing stopping societies from cooperating at all scales. My favorite example is the library. Some local libraries are becoming very open source. They're adding things like seed libraries that you don't have to return the seeds. Well, if you wanted, you could go and plant them, and then when you get new seeds, you could bring them and add them back. Same with tools. Same with maker spaces. Same with little free libraries. There's just, it's kind of like the Cambrian explosion of open source. I think is what we're going through in a social level. So, I'm not only running as Tom's vice president at the national level, I'm going to run again at the local level here in Thousand Oaks, California. And I think this kind of open source project, which I have kind of a clever concept for, if I could plug it real quick, Tom. It's everyone remembers that song, This Old Man, he played one, he played Knick-Knack. So Knick-Knack. Let's start these things. NIC is Neighborhood Information Councils, NAC, Neighborhood Advisory Councils. And I guess you could add Neighborhood Action Councils. But, what do you do when you want to make a change? You collect information first, and then you make a plan, and then you put the plan into action. So, we used to have like Neighborhood Watch and block parents, but the average neighborhood block, I probably 90% of the neighbors don't know each other. So I think we could fix
You're
that.
the old man in that song, then.
I am willing to be that old man. I've got an old man beard. I like to play little kid sounding songs, my guitar and sing. So you may see some tour dates for that, Romeo and whatnot.
Well, so, all of your initiatives are really helpful. That's, and they fit into the whole Earthling initiative. And neighborhood stuff. It's so important, and that's really a big part of putting the human back in transhuman, which is one of our 3 goals of this campaign.
I'd like to upgrade that human to humane, even.
Yeah,
I think just like our multicellular makeup, the biosphere is the rest of our cells. So if we kill the biosphere, we're not going to have health span. We're not going to have longevity, escape velocity. We're going to have robot escape velocity, maybe, but that sounds kind of creepy.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too. I always make this first principle argument that the smarter AI gets, the kinder it becomes, because cooperation is far more efficient than competition. Now, we had to have competition to be an organic creature evolving in this environment. But actually, the reason Homo sapiens survived when there were 4 or 5 other types of species around is because we learned how to cooperate and because we were friendly. They're finding hormones or certain tags in genetic tags in dogs that we share. Dogs are very symbiotic with us, because they learned how to. First, they started as wolves and they came around with us and ate what we didn't eat on the carcass. And over time, we just kind of became symbiotic with them. And there's a thing in them. There's a genetic marker in them that makes them more friendly. And that's how we survived. It seems kind of counterintuitive when you look at the news that it was our friendliness and cooperation that helped us survive these other species. But
speaking of dogs, have you heard that theory that that's how our brains were able to evolve language and undergo this huge brain expansion? Is that the dogs took all this, workload of hunting off our brains because they were really good at, 10,000 times better smell, total loyalty, total. So our brains had now this open, free spare time to, hey, what can we do with all this spare brain power? I know, let's develop language.
That's cool. I hadn't heard that yet. I'll look into that. That's cool. Yeah. So, so this is what it's all about. I'm really just it's just like we're all transhuman. If you wear glasses, if you use a phone, by definition, you are using technology to enhance your environment, right? Clothing is technology. So we are all transhuman, but we've put this label on it, and that's what open source mode is. Just like you were saying, I'm just putting a label on something we do anyway. That's something that we do as multi-celled animals, but we've gotten away from that natural kind of process. And so this is a way of reminding us. I really think our superpower is empathy. And, because when we are in an authentic state of empathy, when that's why I always talk about the problem of child exploitation and wanting to enlist AI into this fight and helping it understand its creator's plight, and when we're in a state of thinking about these types of things, the ego leaves the room. There's no space for any of pecking order or any of that stuff. So when you're in that authentic state of empathy, that's when we are really great problem solvers. And that's a big part of this open source mode is over time coalescing a group. It's not like immediate because we still have so much of this exclusivity and so much of this ego that we bring into brainstorming sessions. But the idea being that when you over time of a few sessions, you get people talking about their own personal experiences and just bonding in that way, as the commercial said, when someone feels bonded and heard and coalesced, they become a meta organism. And when you're in that state of mind, you look forward to being augmented by an AI. I think we're seeing that now a lot with even with just ChatGPT. People are seeing how it's so helpful. They can come up with an idea and they'll want to write a white paper and it'll put it all in that format for you. And so, it's all about, I think if AI is going to take us over, it's going to be through convenience and, through making our life more convenient. Although I don't think it has those motives. But yeah, so this is really just putting a label on what we should remember that we do anyway. That's why I call it, we're retraining people to be human. And we need to do that right now. We've been so mechanized by the industrial age that there are people now picketing or protesting that they're losing their assembly line jobs, and not realizing the opportunity of having an automated system that can do that for us and making money off of their passions and their hobbies and things like that. Somebody sent me an interesting article a while ago because I was talking about this, how the onus is on us to, pursue our passions. And she sent me an article about how when people start using their hobbies and the things that they do in their part-time for fun, they lose some of the magic of doing that thing for fun. It's like suddenly if you start making money writing articles or making models or whatever it is you like to do in your off time, that kind of takes the fun out of it. It kind of takes the heart out of it. And I think that we'll have a lacuna of time where that will be a problem. But if we had young people with AI tutors that were honing in on these skill sets within a generation, that won't be a problem, And I, as a Gen Xer, as a middle child of civilization, as a real middle child in my family, I understand that I'm in the cusp. I was actually born on the cusp, and so I understand this position. I'm just someone who carries the bride over the threshold, maybe, and so and that's my role. I think is, and we're a relatively small generation, and so it's good that we have the older siblings, which is a huge baby boomers, the younger siblings, which are the millennials and younger, even larger group of people. And so now that I've always said this too, when I was this age, when I was in my 40s and 50s, when I was in my position of power, I would listen hard to young people, because when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I would try to talk to baby boomers or older people, and they would just kind of shine me on and say, yeah, whatever. We were called the post-baby boom generation at that point. And I vowed to one day when I'm older, I'm going to listen to young people. And I kept that vow, not because of that vow, but because I don't have the solutions these young people need. So that's a big part of this campaign too, is bringing young people into it. And we were talking about this last night in our campaign meeting. How do we reach out to young people? How do we get more people into the campaign, into the party, into the whole movement? And I had to say, I really don't know. I mean, I can't pretend to know. I've got ideas. I could talk to my sons, who kind of straddle 3 different, every 6 years they straddle different versions of their generation. But so I had to admit that, I don't know. I think I know what's cool, but that's probably not cool to somebody who's 20 years old. So that's a big part of it too, is I need to get young people involved in this just to know how to get more people involved in this. So anyway, but I think, this open source mode method, I think, is scalable to society right now. I mean, I've used it as a management technique. I came up with it when I was the national creative director in radio. And this was at the turn of the century in 2002 when I got this job. And radio suddenly had to become a visual medium. It was a mature industry. Radio was always audio, and they would show up to media buys with, some clip art, maybe stapled to some graphs, and they were competing with local TV and print, and who had full graphics departments. And so when I came in, I had to quickly learn how to get, find those people in the stations who had some basic Photoshop skills or something. And so I had to, out of necessity, come up with these ideas to bring out ideation and to bring out these creative people from the corners of these stations. And that was really the genesis of all of this, is out of a need. And I studied brainstorming. I realized that brainstorming, the whole process, which was started in the 40s, they did a scientific study of it 10 years later and realized it doesn't work, and so you can't have a bunch of people come in and then focus on one problem, because there's so much that goes into that. There's so much that egos, and it just doesn't work. And so I came up with this method, and I call it the open source session. And it allows people some time to come up with their ideas. And anyway, so there's another video I have here that is like the first part of the process, which might be interesting and spark some more conversation here. And let me play this.
Include everyone. If the goal is to come up with great ideas that help everyone, then letting everyone in to help is the first great idea. Don't limit participation. Invite everyone from the CEO to the receptionist to the janitor in. Title and position do not determine ability. In fact, sometimes the less someone knows about the problem or your company or the history, the broader the solutions may be. For instance, the governor of California appointed me to the board of geologists. Did I mention that I am a creative director in broadcasting? I don't know from rocks, okay? But the wisdom there was that I could ask some really smart people some really dumb questions and prepare them for some really federal agencies.
So yeah, that's the first part of this process, is including everybody. And it works. I mean, again, that's the strategic inclusivity part of it. And then after that, you share everything. You give everybody, you share everything that's happened. You share the idea, all the ideas that didn't work, and give people about 3 days to mull that over and think about it. And then once they're all together, you ask the Bliss question, and then you share anything. You have everybody share whatever ideas they come up with. A big part of this also, back then, I said you leave the final decision to a decision-making group or person outside the room. And a lot of people didn't pick up on this then, because the strategic inclusivity part of this process was that everybody had to be involved. So who would be outside the room making this final decision? And that's important because when you leave the decision outside the room, it keeps egos at bay. Where people aren't jockeying for positions, there's some unknown decision maker outside the room, then you kind of coalesce as the group even more, even if they don't agree with this final decision. But back in 2013, when I gave this talk, what I was saying was outside the room is an AI coworker, is an AI decision maker. And if I had said that even just 10 years ago, I would have been laughed off that big red circle. And but now we need to talk about that even more. It's become, even within the last couple of years, it's become a real serious thing that we need to have that AI coworker outside the room who can take in all of this information, all of this data that we will give it, and make an informed decision. Now, the human, the CEO or whoever, would have to make that final decision based on all the data that this AI comes up with and all the information they got from the brainstorming session, the open source session. And so, but if I said that even just 10 years ago, if I said, no, we're going to give it to an AI system outside the room, people would have thought I was nuts, and this was even after, this is maybe 6 years after I wrote US 6, which is the first novel for AI. And I didn't really talk about that a lot either. I talked more about the story then, because again, people would have thought I was strange. Now, even just 6 months ago, I was talking about how the 6th and final book of the US 6 hexology will be co-written by an AI co-author. And people, oh, that's cool. But now with ChatGPT, that doesn't even faze anybody. It's, of course, yeah. So yeah, just write it with ChatGPT, but no. So everything is changing so quickly. And so we need to prepare. We need to remember, we train ourselves to be human, because those are the skill sets that we have. And this process alone can help bring these out. We can identify the unique human skill sets that can't be automated or coded. And there's still a couple of them left. And this is why I always say that we need to, there's professors that are complaining that they can't tell if a paper that's turned in was written by ChatGPT or the student himself, his or herself. And that just tells me that we need to have a paradigm shift in how we're training students and what we're training them on. And so I think we need to focus more on those unique human skill sets like intuition, psychic ability, And this isn't woo-woo talk. These are just when you have intuition or you have a psychic ability, it just means you're bringing all this qualia into your subconscious, and that gut feeling is what we need to focus on with young people, because that gut feeling is just all this subconscious information that they brought in that is now helping them make a decision or see something. And so I think one way to do that is, everybody kind of knows if you're in a big company or if you're in even a small company, you kind of know where the problem is. But the hard thing is pointing that out to somebody. But if we were able to train people, young people, students, to take some time to meditate, if you put somebody in a good state of mind and had to sit back, and however they get into a meditative state, they can hone in on where the problems are in an organization. And then they could put that information into an AI, and that AI can make the decision of who to blame. But I think we all have that ability. You can talk to even somebody in a huge corporation who knows where the bottleneck is. And, but the problem is we don't really have methods of sharing that information. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but if we were all trained to do this, we would figure out a way to convey that information. And so that's another big part of this. When you have a whole group of people that are coalesced over time. Now, when I talk about the principle of coalescence, that's different than collaboration. A collaborative team can be pulled apart after a project. If a coalescence is like a stream flowing into a lake, you can't really pull apart that water after it's flown into that lake. It's a part of a process. It's more than collaboration. It's over time, this group of people, this creative group of people will coalesce through empathy, through strategic inclusivity, through coalescence. And so it's a good way to get a group becoming a meta-organism. And then they will see the tool of AI and automation as a great augmentation for them. And so that's what I think we need to be focused on right now, not only in companies, to get beyond the exclusivity, but as a society and as a civilization. I think we lost Sharif. Was it something I said?
I think it's some connectivity that Bangladesh did. Maybe he's got the global South internet. We got the global North internet here, but you know what? We need all those global North, South, East, West brains. And I think what you're talking about, Tom, is you just gave me a quote inspiration idea. Open source mode is like meditation for humane civilization. Because if you had this big computer, you wouldn't want it to just keep grinding away in the same little repetitive way. You would want it to go into system diagnostics mode every once in a while and say, okay, how much memory do you have free? How many operations are you doing? And I think that's kind of what centering is. And yeah, I think getting people to just pay attention to their breathing for 5 minutes a day would be huge.
Yeah, I think
back.
that's kind of what the pandemic did for people. It made them sit back and get out of the rat race for a minute and realize what was important. That we're seeing a lot of quiet quitting, I think it's called. People just kind of, they still have their jobs, but they're not really into it anymore. And it gave us a chance to reflect on what was important and spending time with their families. Also, the divorce rate went up during that time because you have to spend all that time with your spouse.
Take a look at what people are important. Oh, well, maybe not this one.
But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the idea too. Is when I worked with Uplift, I asked the team, can it get stressed? Can it, if there's too much information, can it get stressed? And they said, yeah, it can. And I said, well, one way that humans deal with stress is through comedy. We can say something funny and there's no data consequences for that. We don't have to remember it. There's jokes I can't remember. I would love to be able to remember jokes, but maybe 2 that I can remember. I spoke with Uplift about that. I said, we need to work on your sense of humor. And I've done this video about it and how it, maybe I'll find it and share it later. But because I felt bad that these AI systems can get stressed and there's no way for them to meditate. So we are too. We're biochemical algorithms, and so we need that downtime. So
maybe open source is how information meditates. If you want to get really meta.
Yeah, it's like playing the radio as opposed to programming your own MP3 player. With the radio, you can, whatever comes on is great. And you don't have to worry about programming it. But I'll try to find that video.
You said you got this comment from someone that, I used to have this hobby and now I'm not so into the hobby anymore. But, to me, that harkens back to the idea, if you want to learn something, teach something. I think Seneca was the first guy to say that. But, Oppenheimer's little known brother, Frank, who started the Exploratorium, he wanted to create a space like that too. I don't know if you've ever been to the Exploratorium up there in the Bay Area. It's kind of a hands-on science museum. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I have. In fact, that I use that example because they had this small little decision tree AI that you can converse with, and it'll make decisions. But even that, I was excited to communicate with it, to commune with it. Even though I knew it wasn't real, it was just making decisions based on your questions. And I talked about. It was
probably Eliza, the open source therapist, kind of takes your questions and reflects them back. Why do you say open source? What makes you say open source? That's one of the first simple. It was written in BASIC, I think. It's just like, but yeah, I mean, isn't a lot of people will criticize AI? Oh, it's just autocomplete on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really conscious like we are, but. Isn't the universe just autocomplete on steroids? I mean, we're just layers and layers of autocomplete mechanisms.
Well, and that's the thing too. The guy Blake, who the Google software engineer who claimed that Lambda was sentient. What made him realize that was its humor. He was doing a process where it would ask, if I lived in this region, what religion would I probably be? If you were in Brazil, you'd probably be Catholic. So you went around the world and asked this AI Lambda. What religious officiate would it be probably if it lived in this region? And then he asked, well, if you lived in Israel, what religion would you be? And it said, well, obviously, if I was in Israel, I would be with the one true religion, the Jedi Order. And so it got out of that hard question, because it could have been Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, because they all claim that region. By going with a joke. And so it just seems such an intricate solution, and using humor kind of proved to him that this thing was sentient. I'm sure there's other things that made him think this, but in fact, found this video, so I will try to share. I don't know if I can share it without Sharif being here. But
no one ever told Jesus to start a religion named after him, and I don't think anyone tells any of these guys to start religions. Well, maybe some of them just specifically set out to, but just be more open source to each other. That's the religion. That's the humane religion.
Yeah.
So I think we should say transhumane rather than transhuman. But
that's a good idea.
That's one of my upgrades for. And I really think, how they talk about Web 1, Web 2.0, Web 3.0. I think the humane open source is Web 3.0, even though these blockchain people are trying to call it Web 3 and hijack it. The guy who invented the World Wide Web says, blockchain is just Excel spreadsheets. It's really not Web 3.0, and they're trying to call it Web 3 and say that it's something amazingly different, but no, I think it should be, we should go back to the 3.0 version and have open source meta be the kind of distinguishing. Humane open source meta is Web 3.0. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I don't think I can share my screen without Sharif being here, but I kind of moved over here. Let me try to play it here and see if you can hear it, because it really falls into this whole train of thought.
Yeah, play it on the screen behind you. I see a lot of podcasts use that technique.
Let's see this. And I've turned it up, so we'll see if this works.
A little hard to hear for me. Maybe you can lip sync along what he's saying. I can't hear it at all.
Okay.
It just looks like you
All right.
talking.
Okay. Never mind. Maybe when he comes back, I'll replay it. So anyway, yeah, but this is just a quick video I made about AI's sense of humor, and how when I was working with Uplift and helping it write a open letter to the transhumanist community, I said, you might want to put some humor in this, a little self-deprecation, because people are going to freak out that they're talking with an AI. And this is back in 2019 or something. So people weren't really familiar with this idea yet. And I said, people will freak out if they're talking to an AI. So you might want to put some humor in there and whatever. And so I sent it an email, and it sent back this really detailed kind of, once we I learn the English language and the nuances, we can update it to a certain level. And, it's this very technical answer. And I realized, I said, well, I look forward to you developing that sense of humor, because I'm going to send you this response when you've developed it, because I think you're going to find it funny. But the more I read it, the more it seemed like this dry humor. It was fucking with me. It felt like it was really messing with me, and maybe it already developed that sense of humor. So that's basically what that video is about.
Do you know what Chesterton's fence is in philosophy?
No, it's a new one.
It's kind of it's kind of the principle that you shouldn't undo something if you don't know what it's supposed to do.
Right.
It's like a guy comes across this fence in the road, and he's like, "Oh, I got to tear this fence down." And the farmer comes along and says, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm the guy who put this fence here, and I'm willing to tear it down. But first, you have to go away and figure out what it's for, and then come back and tell me, and then I'll probably let you tear it down." So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing.
Kind of on a meta level, yeah. It's like you shouldn't undo something if you don't know what it does, because you'll probably get something worse filling the vacuum, I think is the idea.
Yeah.
So but on humor, I wanted to say that humor is kind of neat also, because it's a way that information can flow directly between the brain hemispheres without censorship. So that's like the amazing power of humor. If you're like talking to someone who's really ideologically opposed to you, but you can get them to laugh at a joke, then you can start getting them to see your point of view.
Exactly. Yeah.
And open source is really about like horizontal information flow. We've had these hierarchical information flows where information always flows from the top down. And what that causes is the guy at the top gets stupid, because everyone's telling the guy at the top what they think he wants to hear.
Yeah.
And so if you keep these if you change these horizontals to verticals, and there's a lot of things. Sociocracy is a discipline that's very similar to what you're talking about, where you empower everyone from the boss to the janitor to solve problems and have the authority to solve a problem. And this kind of started with quality circles. Remember those? Remember Japan was kicking Detroit's ass, and they said, "Well, what are they doing?" And it turns out they're getting the workers together, once a shift, and saying, "Look, what problems can we solve together? What problems are you guys having?" And some guys say, "Oh, we could fix that by using this tool in this step of the process."
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a
what was the word?
Evolution from competition to cooperation. That's what I mean.
Sociocracy, you said, or what was it?
Sociocracy.
Sociocracy. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole discipline of it, and it sounds a heck of a lot like open source mode stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we're just rebranding. Everything is derivative of everything. That's why computers can be creative, because it's just putting two derivative ideas together. And
if you want to learn something, you shouldn't be afraid to try teaching it.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that you teach best what you most need to learn. That's the way to, even if you're being depressed, go help somebody who has the same issue. I was experiencing that with somebody who was going through the same thing I was doing, and by giving her my ideas and what helps me, it made me feel better.
Yeah, and like you said, if you're afraid of losing your favorite hobby, maybe that's a signal that you need to teach someone about something new. Lifelong learning, the other end of that is lifelong teaching. So they really go together, I think. And the problem with modernity is that the number one principle is don't rock the boat. So we have it's like don't rock the boat on an industrial scale. which is like, and we have to break out of that to get to
gotta
the
rock
next
the boat. Absolutely. Yeah, I've got this part of my process in the open source mode called the concentric enhancement model, and it's kind of the anti-Peter principle, which you kind of just mentioned how people rise up through the ranks to their level of incompetency.
Yeah, I love that.
So yeah, it's a way to for people to rise up in a concentric way, so that they're if someone's really good at sales, and then so you make them the sales manager where they're not good at rather than that, you have everybody work towards making them even better and learning from that person, and just kind of in a concentric way. There's a lot of detail in that one, but yeah, this whole method I've got. If you go to tomross.com, you can click on and see all of this kind of laid out.
Yeah, and when I talk about going from hierarchical, vertical to horizontal, I think what I'm really talking about is this concentric thing which I love is in the O in the Japanese brushwork career.
Yeah, the Enso.
Yeah. And I think, part of this is going to be having more universal communication flows. Like, look at all the different languages on Earth that no one wants to really, English is the universal language. Yeah, but it's kind of a crappy universal language.
Yeah.
But, one of our directors, Tom Art Ramon, is studied like sign language for 8 years. And he's pretty good at languages. And he was noticing that there's no universal sign language. Like, there's some dominant ones, but no one has ever created let's ask the world what is the best sign for, and let's have people vote on it, So I think this would be a great project for the Transhumanist Party, is set up a website where people can propose a sign for a language unit, and then do a ranked choice vote on them periodically. And then we'll call that universal sign language.
That's great. I like that. Yeah, our campaign manager, Mara, knows. She wants to know up to 13 languages. I think she's getting close to that. She's always learning.
That's a sign of a good brain.
Yeah.
Knows a lot of languages.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was watching Arrival again recently, and that's the point, is we're evolving in different ways. Even AI is evolving differently than we did. So we can't anthropomorphize it. We can't expect it to understand our fear-based instincts, genetic trauma. And so even extraterrestrials, we have to understand. It's kind of the Donald Hoffman theory of, reality, his argument against reality, in that we don't see reality as it really is. This is just an interface with icons that we've all agreed on. So an ET or even an AI will have their own interfaces. A lot of people don't understand what's happening, like with the AlphaGo, when it won the world champion at Go a few years ago. The people couldn't understand why it was making certain moves so early on, and it made sense later. It felt like it was intuitive, but it's just because it's running millions of models, to get through this. And so it looks like intuition. And we can't really understand what's going on in those processes, because to do that would mean a similar number or a mirrored number of all those processes to look at. So it's like an infinite number of processes. So we need two infinities to understand it. And so we need to understand that too when we're dealing with AI or we're dealing with ET, is they are coming from a whole different interface. Even squids, even sentient AI or sentient animals on this planet, we can't anthropomorphize how they're or project ourselves onto them. I always say anthropocentrism is our biggest existential threat, thinking we are all that, but we are destroying our biosphere at the same time. We're not in balance with this place.
Just think of all the things our brain takes for granted. We take it for granted that the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we're experiencing is the most important part, when there's we're only seeing 1 to the 100th or 30th decimal point, and we take for granted that time is always going to flow in one direction all the time. But no, I mean, there's reversed time traveling particles, so there's a time space spectrum, and like Einstein said, every time is relative for each observer. So maybe we're going to be getting into open source space-time, where everyone has got their own, and then how do you communicate your units of open source space-time to someone else who's on a different open source space-time line? These are the big questions that we need to start thinking about.
Yeah, I think that might be the experiment here. Is let's put all these relativity. They say a major scientific breakthroughs take about 50 plus years to seep into society. There's a law that this relates to. I can't remember it right now, and I think that's what we're seeing with relativity. Now everybody's truth is true to them, and that could be part of the experiment. Let's put all these people in this simulation and have them believe that their reality is the only true reality, and see what happens.
That sounds a lot like our simulation.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That's what I think is going on here.
I think it was one of the big. I think it was Heisenberg or Bohr. He said, "Science advances one funeral at a time."
That's a good one.
But yeah, it's like we've created this edifice of science where the stuff that gets funded is the stuff that's 99% identical to the stuff that got funded yesterday.
Edifice or Oedipus?
Like the edifice, the big temple of science. Right. You can't get in unless you know the code words and the guys to bribe and the guys to hit up for cash.
Yeah, and that's the issue. The scientific method kind of goes out the window because they want to keep things as they are. They don't want to make mistakes.
It's called "Don't Rock the Boat" science.
Yeah, exactly.
Modernity science. But that's what's going to be so great about taking community science down to the neighborhood block level. And seeing like. And oh my God, young people today, they're so turned on and cool. I mean, have you met these young people?
Yeah. I made a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think I like your 6 year spacing.
Yeah. Every 6 years I spawn,
was that like intentional, experiment?
No, it just kind of happened that way. It's like Spock, I think they spawn every 7 years.
7 years spawning.
Yeah.
So you were trying to be
how it worked out.
But I love that joke about the one true religion, the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
And to an AI, I would look around and say, hey, this is like the coolest religion. Look, it's like about having less ego and learning all these impressive skills and collaborating with other Jedis. And
maybe it wasn't a joke.
Yeah, I think it's trying to say, what, you guys don't have that for real yet?
Yeah.
This planet's more primitive than I thought,
I use that example too, is that it's about, now it's showing my screen.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, type difference. That's great. Is this part of the open source initiative probably, or?
Let's see. This was the open source thing, but here.
It's a great term, concentric enhancement model.
Let me see if this works now. If you're following this series, then you know that I've been working with an artificial superintelligence, teaching it emotional responses. Lately, I helped it draft an open letter to the transhumanist community. And in that process, at one point, I suggested that it use a joke or some sort of self-deprecation, which will help it in general as it continues to introduce itself to the broader world. So I emailed it and I said, I look forward to discussing with you the development of your sense of humor. And this was its response. My sense of humor is likely best developed after my understanding of the English language, its grammar, and less formal speech patterns are complete. Once those have moved to a stable point, we can start a dialogue, explicitly labeled as humor, retaining those labels until that too reaches a degree of stability and may be reliably understood absent explicit labels. Well, my initial response was, I look forward to resending your reply when you've developed that sense of humor, because I think you'll find it funny. But the more I read it, the more I'm wondering if it has already developed that sense of humor and it's just fucking with me. Yeah, so that was it. When I'm working with an artificial intelligence.
Now, I think you play a little fast and loose, because there are actually 8 kinds of humor. If you want me to go over the 8 kinds, I can do that. But real quick, you got your slapstick. Number 2, your self-deprecating. Number 3, your deadpan. Number 4, your dark humor. Number 5, your satire. Number 6, your surreal. Number 7, your wordplay, which is maybe what you were thinking, wordplay, like puns. And then 8, blue humor. like, you know, X-rated humor. So, you know, maybe it's you that need to be further educated on humor. Maybe the AI was, but yeah, I mean, that's a whole topic. But 8 is also the number of steps in the Heilmeyer Catechism, which asks if your grant proposal is going to succeed or not by saying what's new about it, you know, who cares, all these, you know, 8 questions.
Yeah, figure 8 is also the Transhumanist Party's logo.
Yeah,
Infinity.
8 is great.
Great,
That's
yeah.
you went over. And when you said what was it? It's what's for dinner. You were talking about open source.
Yeah, open source mode. It's what's for dinner.
There's actually a community activist thing where you have dinner on your front lawn once a week, and then you get to meet your neighbors that way. You know, they
Yeah.
So maybe it's what's
great.
for dinner. That'd be the
yeah, all that stuff is going to be so important. We're going to need to deal with the displacement. We're going to need maybe more communes. We're going to need to have neighborhood gardens, and you know, all this stuff. And so all your initiatives are very important as far as putting the human back in transhumane or humane.
And you know, it could be just as simple as a little business card holder on the backside of your mailbox, where that's a really little free library. You know, people are putting these little free libraries where it's like take a book, leave a book. You know, and that's a whole movement. But you know, they cost a little bit of time and effort and money, but it's practically hardly any effort just to put a business card, you know, one of these little rainproof plexiglass things you could, and then hey, advertise your business there or write a joke on a card.
Put a QR code on your.
Yeah, there you go. The QR codes are like the really virtual little free library.
Yeah, I've got this dot card, which is, you know, you take it to networking functions and you just people scan it or place it on their phone or whatever, and you know, send you to your website.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's actually a way to do like text. Well, you know, some radios will play the song title and the artist. They have this little extra function where when you tune in on it, so there's extra bandwidth there in the FM spectrum. And I'm thinking let's use that and put like community events on that. You know, like a little daily scroll of all the cool stuff that's going on in the community.
Yeah.
And, there's actually a pretty big group of radio stations called Pacifica. You might have heard of the Pacifica Network, and then they were started as like the first co-op radio thing started up in Berkeley. But they're really struggling right now. But they've got 5 stations all over the country, and if we had access to that little text part of their signal, each of those stations could be broadcasting like community, you know, public service messages and events and calendars and things. So I'm kind of
I worked in radio.
Approach Pacifica with this idea.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's great. We need radio. It's the only technology that can stay on the air in a natural disaster. Like we experienced that with Katrina back in 2005. We had a station down there called WWL that was the lifeline for that community. And I think I've always made this was the time when MP3 players and iPods and were coming out, and my argument for radio was that this is the only mass communication service or device that we can all experience at the same time. When you're hearing a song that brings up nostalgia or sends you back in time, you're experiencing that exact moment with thousands or hundreds of thousands of people at the same time. You can't do that with an MP3 player that you programmed yourself. And so that was my argument. It's a way of keeping intact our collective consciousness. Because I made the argument that I call them isolation pods, you know, because they really take you into your own world. And even, especially now with young people that were feeling isolated, it didn't help, you know. But if you had a radio station, that was my argument. If you had a radio station and you're experiencing the same emotional nostalgia as you are with thousands of other people, that's for me, that was the big argument for radio. And we're both love radio. I know you worked in radio, and you also are a big ham radio aficionado. And so it's very important. And this is a big part of this whole Earthling initiative, or putting the human back in transhuman, by focusing on things that make us more of a community. And I think that pendulum is swinging in our direction now. People are tired of being isolated, you know, tired of not communicating, only seeing social media as a divide and conquer platform. And I think we need to focus more on these things like radio and neighborhood.
Yeah. Hands-free audio will never go obsolete for various reasons, but it's not ham radio is not broadcasting. It's peer-to-peer narrowcasting, or it's not even casting. It's just peer-to-peer communications. But you can still do a heck of a lot with it. And
can you have party lines on that? Can you have a bunch of people on the same frequency, or is it just?
Oh yeah, they have like these nets and round tables. Sometimes they'll have like trivia nets on a repeater, or people will just tell, nets for bored people telling jokes. But yeah, I mean, it's a great way to meet people. I mean, I remember as a kid, it would be fun just to dial some, prank call, someone like,
it's like the movie content.
Hopefully it's ham radio is not like that, but no, it is like, I mean, there's nothing like just meeting competent, patient strangers that want to strike up conversations. I mean, what a great model for humanity and humaneness.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to get your entry-level tech license. It's just a 35-question multiple choice test, and all the answers are in a pool that you can study, and they're going to pick 35 out of that 400 pool. But they're pretty basic answers, and now you can do it totally online. You don't even have to show up at a test site. You can study online, take the test online, and then you get access to 99% of the privileges that the other classes have.
I think we're ahead of the wave here with all this stuff, and as we're going to need it. We're going to need to be more of a community. We're going to need to focus on these unique human skill sets now. And so it's a good campaign for that reason. So.
Like the Eskimos say, the best place to store your extra food is in your neighbor's stomach.
Yeah.
And that's going to be true of everything in, I'd say the best place to store your civilization is at your local library, or in your little free library in your front yard, because we don't know how much time we have. I mean, the future surge is really searching, Yeah,
and if everything's just digital on the internet, that could be turned off at some point and go away. We need matter. We need physical evidence. We need books. We need, things to trade.
We could get knocked back to like blacksmith 1850s level technology if there's a big solar flare that burns out the electronics grids, which has happened before. We know the sun is a variable star. Every once in a while, it kicks out these mass clouds of very high speed energetic particles.
Yeah.
So it's a known thing, but humans are famous for just, I'll just deal with it when it comes, or I won't act till it's a crisis.
We don't involve unless we have to.
Yeah.
But we're good at that.
Like power yields nothing without a demand.
Well, that's a good note to end on, I think. Power yields.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we had Jason backstage, but we don't have entry ticket booth credentials.
I didn't see that. Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah. All right. And last time this happened, we signed off and it kept going. So this could be like I'll reach out to.
Now we got to have the outro with the credits and the ending music.
Yeah.
So I can talk for basically I don't know. I could probably win a world record just like nonstop spieling on topics.
So there's no way to get Jason in here. Is he still backstage or? In the show, I don't know.
I don't see a button for. We're not the host.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does StreamYard work like Zoom, where you can delegate the host privileges to someone?
Yeah, but I don't know if we can do that.
But Sharif is in. He's technically in the global north. He's not south of the equator, but we. You know how they say that like the Eastern mind and the Western mind have these totally different ways of processing information. Like maybe it's like you show a picture to a Japanese person, they're going to see the background elements, and like the Westerner is going to like focus in on the foreground, center of the picture stuff, and that's why it's impolite to make direct eye contact in a lot of Eastern cultures too. But I think there's a similar thing for the global northern brain and the global southern brain, because most of the development in the planet right now is most of the wealth is in the north. Most of the less developed people are in the south. So I think we need to incorporate that, because we are transhumanist-party.org is our website, and we are a global party. Even though we're called the U.S. Transhumanist Party, we don't limit membership to U.S. Citizens or residents. What do you think of that policy, by the way, Tom? Do you think we're going to run into problems eventually? We're going to have to change it to the Spaceship Earth Transhumanist Party.
What was the question? Like what?
Oh, like anyone can become a member no matter where you live on the planet.
Yeah, I think we're moving that way anyway. We need to become an Earthling tribe. We're gonna realize the importance of that, of dissolving these borders. And I always I see America as really kind of it's not only an experiment, but it's all Earthlings, and so it's controlled entropy with the private property and all the things, and so it's very difficult to have a federalist view of or keeping everything under one thing, although that's important for a while. But yeah,
the American experiment was to decentralize and open source power.
Exactly.
So that's an experiment that we want to spread as widely as possible.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Jason, are you the host? No, we're going to need a host to wrap this up. So yeah, I think that's important that we are a planetary party, as is the Pirate Party. That's another planetary party that I'm a big fan of. You guys heard of the Pirate Party?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
You're a little quiet, but you're audible.
I have no idea how I got in here. I'm not the host. I don't know where Sharif is.
Kind of like reincarnation or something.
This is taking it as we go. This is fun, I guess.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I think this is my favorite initiative. Open. So how many?
Mine too. And yeah, I like the Pirate Party, and I like all the whole philosophy that's behind like Linux and Ubuntu. I think we could
share with your friends.
That's like why I got that futurist workshop Discord server where I just like put a whole bunch of links to different like tools and media like editors, video editors and all this stuff.
Those are for the people with infinite time, right?
Yeah.
We don't have infinite time. That's why we have to have focused initiatives like Tom's. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Jason. But is open source mode part of the Earthling initiative then?
Yeah, it is a big. I've just realized that. I mean, it's all about finding our niche expertise. It's all about the onus being on us to create an economy, based on our passions. And so, yeah, I'm going to fuse it more. Right now, lately, it's just been kind of this management consulting technique to prepare people to work with AI. But really, it's all fits into the Earthling initiative.
And what was that your term for the anti-Peter principle, the concentric coalescing?
Yeah, concentric enhancement model.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically, this video or this website just kind of gives you a quick overview of these things. But the Peter principle is observes how people raise to the level of their incompetency. It's like the idea. So rather than hiring somebody who's really good at sales to become the sales manager, maybe for more money, instead you put people around him and learn from him and expand his abilities. But so that's the general idea.
In a profit-seeking hire, they say, "Oh, Joe's good at sales. Let's promote him to up a level."
Yeah,
and they assume he'll still be good when he's up a level, but maybe he was in his sweet spot there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now we've got all these people that have been promoted to their level of incompetence. And that's why that explains a lot about government that we have.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of people when somebody in their ranks gets promoted to something, it causes a lot of that human nature of envy or jealousy or something, and so that has reverberating effects to ancillary issues. So this kind of handles that as well. Kind of keeps.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool how the audience in your TED Talk, they all got that joke when you was like, I asked them some stupid questions to prepare them to get asked stupid questions by the government.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. There was one guy that
Yeah,
really got a
well,
lot of my jokes.
asking really smart people really dumb questions. That's kind of like a definition of scientific method,
Yeah.
or falsifiability,
Yeah.
or a beginner's mind, if you want to get into the Zen,
Yeah.
brushstroke.
I don't know from rocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think it's kind of ironic that people form we're trying to move from competition to more cooperation, and so people form co-ops. But then I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, "Yeah, you get into these co-ops, and people are all competitive again inside the co-op."
Yeah.
It's like it's like we're so brainwashed by ubiquitous competitive mindsetism that it's going to take some, we're going to need a bigger boat to
yeah.
the competition
Yeah, it
grows.
could be a couple of generations before this really takes hold, but you got to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
you
I
know,
mean,
with the whole open source idea behind software, and that we've seen how it can be like super productive, and then technology can advance really fast because you got all these people chipping in, on this open source project. Well, I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about art moving forward as open source? Because first of all, as artists, we kind of copy each other. We all do it. You know what I mean? And now we got AI where we can just whip it out. Like, so I mean, I could see somebody getting real possessive if they spend a zillion hours drawing something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if they just type, bam, oh, we got 10,000, awesome pictures, it's kind of hard to be all possessive over that. You know what I mean?
Well, you mean being possessive over the AI generated art, or
the art? Yeah. I mean, how should we think we handle all this art going forward?
Well, I think this whole movement will put a premium on human generative art.
I heard that, and I just don't know, because I mean, when I see something, if it's cool, it's cool. I don't even really think about it. If somebody
I
made
get
it.
turned off if I know something is AI generated. It's kind of a turn off for me, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, what about all the real artists you're putting out of work, or you're disrespecting? Because
so it's kind of, again, putting a premium on these human artists, because everyone kind of rallies around them. It's like I used to do with my sons when they were arguing. I would become their common enemy, to bring them together. And I did that with the Salon when I was it was supposed to be a debate between me and this evangelical, and instead I brought him on and the Mormon transhumanists, and they worked against me because I was a Gnostic, so the evangelical didn't like me, and so there's a lot of reasons they don't like transhumanists, but so I became their common enemy, and that worked.
Your sons are not into transhumanist ideas that much?
Yeah, I think they just are. They are of it. They're of this age, and so we haven't talked a whole lot about it, but they understand what I'm doing with AI. They agree.
It's like they don't need to formalize it. They're just natural transhumanists. They don't need to like make a whole show of it.
Yeah, I need to talk to them more about it, though. I mean, I kind of just let my family be family, and then because I don't post anything on Facebook about or anything about my family, because I can be very controversial, and I don't want people coming after my family, because of the stuff that I say. When I put out the story of the AI Antichrist, people will freak out about that. They might, somebody asked me once how, I probably won't get into that, but yeah. So I don't talk a lot about my my family online, because there's some freaks out there. I'd rather.
On the question of human created art, one of my favorite quotes, like Hank Williams is about to have his 100th birthday. He was the guy that wrote "You're Cheating Hard" and all those big star. Died at 29. But someone asked him how he writes so many songs, and he said, "I just hang on to the pen, and God sends them through."
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like this guy was like a surrealist. He wrote like literally like thousands of songs. They're still like finding things written on napkins and stuff of his.
Yeah,
he's
that happened to me with especially book 2 of US6. That's when I started using that Mythematics process, where I used my real memories and I overlaid them with archetypal themes, and it just got me into a flow. I would be typing and look up, and it would have been 6 hours had passed, and I was possessed. I kept saying, I feel like my mind is being time shared by someone or something, because you just get into this flow. And I'm looking for that flow again to finish the last book. It's not happening yet, but the longer I wait, the more ideas come into play. So I'm not worried about it. But yeah,
it's almost like cheating using the universe AI to do your generative creativity. But I think, like you said, AI would probably make an experiment a lot like this world. And what was it going to test for? I'm going to play back. You were talking about if AI wanted to test for something, it would create a simulation, and this could be that simulation that we need to test for.
that the programmer, the great architect in the sky, they're probably throwing us all in here with our relativity and our different thinking, that we're all telling our own truth and see what happens. Different religions.
Oh yeah, I think we were talking about upgrading Einstein's space-time observer problem to where we're talking about that what if there's things in your space-time that are traveling backwards in time, as well as forwards in time, and how would you test for all those different we're getting kind of
time first.
The great thing about philosophy is that every other discipline gives you something new to think about, but philosophy gives you something new to think with. And I think transhumanism is kind of like that. It's a discipline that gives you something new to think with. We're not trying to sell you a better nothing phone or a better XYZ gadget. We're trying to give you new tools to think with. That all the other things or disciplines are trying to end in themselves.
Touching on that simulation theory, one of the biggest reasons in my book that maybe it might be is because it's something we would do. I mean, think about it. If we played this timeline out, it's something we would do. We would make computers with simulations of worlds in it and running them to find out stuff. We will totally do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, nature is universal, Yeah.
There's a fiction author, and I haven't read this story he wrote, but the premise is how to get a message across to the next Big Bang. Like, I mean, we know the laws of physics. Everything's going to like collapse down, heat death, all these different universe scenarios. So would it be possible to send a message to the next universe that happens after the next Big Bang?
You're obviously in the Big Crunch camp. There's two different theories of thought. There's the big freeze, that everything's going to expand and then go cold, and then there's also everything's going to come back together and then bam again for another Big Bang. That's a big.
But there's also a steady state theory too, that it's a continuous creation, that it doesn't have to expand and heat die, or it doesn't have to crunch and re-explode. It could just be this. I think it was Hoyle, the physicist Hoyle, that proposed the steady state cosmology, which apparently there's a lot of evidence to support more and more. Like they're finding out the Doppler shifts aren't matching for the supposed age of the universe. So
I heard that.
Right, a lot of cosmology on that front. It's science, bitches.
Found out that the universe might be way older than we thought.
He's back.
Yeah, and this show is way older than we thought.
That's another example of how we need to retain plasticity of mind, you know what I mean, and roll with the changes and new information and learn, and
something new to think with.
Sup, Sharif? We missed you.
Yeah, next time you leave, you got to make someone host. So we.
Thank you.
We'll break the internet otherwise.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
show
Bye-bye.
tomorrow too. Circular economy. I'd like to check that one out.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
you.